Steven Spielberg. Everyone wants to be him, no one can beat him, and gosh darn it, he just might be one of the greatest directors of all time. But why? Because, you little ding-dong, he's the master of invisible directing. Much of what Spielberg does is so smooth and so subtle that half the time, you don't even notice it. I know I haven't. He's a magician with the camera. I believe the best way to demonstrate how incredible Spielberg actually is to analyze the iconic Spielberg oneer, or long take. You see, most long takes draw attention to themselves, so you can just marvel at how long and complicated the scene is. However, Spielberg is built different, because his long takes are often during dialogue scenes, but the techniques he uses make these usually boring shot reverse shot type scenes into masterpieces. So how can I be like him? Well, let's start by analyzing the elements of a Spielberg oneer, starting with, more than anything else, what long takes need to be is dynamic. Nobody wants to watch two characters who barely move stay in one place for a very long time. That's boring. But how do you make a long take dynamic? Well, for Spielberg, it means having many different compositions that are each visually interesting and distinct. For example, look at this scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indiana Jones and Marcus Brody have a conversation that reveals a lot of exposition to the audience. Very important stuff. In this oneer, there are 6 different compositions that are created by simply moving a character or moving a camera. We start with the two standing at the door, then pans to both of them walking into the room for a drink, follows Brody sitting down and Indiana putting clothes into the suitcase, pushes in for Brody and his important exposition, follows Indiana as he crosses the frame and gets his gun, and then finally shows the gun plop into the suitcase. 6 compositions, so many dynamic visuals, exposition, and important character buildup, all beautifully captured in just one take. Chef's kiss, 10 out of 10. But the scene is nothing if these compositions don't seamlessly connect, and Spielberg connects them using... In a Spielberg oneer, camera movements are almost always motivated by something happening on screen, which makes the camera movement feel invisible to the audience. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. First, in this clip from Schindler's List, the camera is motivated first by following Schindler walking into the ballroom, then by following the waiter, and as the waiter walks around the table, where does the camera eventually lead back to? Schindler, in a beautiful, medium close-up. Now that's cinema. Now, let's take a look at this scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Roy, Jillian, and another random guy, who I don't remember the name of, are climbing up the mountain. We start by following the 3 characters, and then, as they exit the frame, we follow the helicopters, and as we follow them, where does the camera eventually lead us back to? The main characters, now in a different composition, without cutting once. The movement of the characters always motivates the movement of the camera, and that creates the invisible directing Spielberg is known for. In the hands of a lesser director, these scenes could have contained 4 to 5 more unnecessary shots, but not my Steven, not him. He only needs 1. When analyzing how a scene uses its setting, I always think to myself, could this scene take place anywhere else on Earth? Do the filmmakers actually use the setting in interesting ways? Did I turn off the stove? In Spielberg's films, the setting is almost always integral to the scene. In long takes, since you can't really rely on doing a simple shot reverse shot, Spielberg has to get creative. For example, in one of Spielberg's first directing gigs for the TV show Columbo, instead of having the 2 actors talking while physically doing nothing, both characters are actively making an omelet, which makes the scene way more interesting and shows how the scene cannot take place anywhere else except for the kitchen. It's a small addition, but oh my god, it makes the scene way more memorable. Advice for young filmmakers: let the actors physically do something. Please, even if it's making an omelet. If I have to see another student film where I see an actor standing around and staring off into space, waiting for their line because the director doesn't know how to figure out something for them to do, I'm gonna lose my mind. In his long takes, Spielberg always utilizes every part of the screen, using the foreground, middle ground, and background. For example, let's look at the scene from War Horse. In this scene, he establishes the jar and the shelf in the foreground, the army officer in the middle ground, and the soldiers and the girl in the background, all at different distances from the camera, all clearly shown in the frame. Now, let's take a look at the scene from Jaws, where the mayor talks to Chief Brody on a ferry. Now, I love this scene, but I want to ask you one question. What do these men do in this scene? Absolutely nothing. But it doesn't matter because they provide interesting depth to the scene and put something between the visually interesting changing background, which is super cool, and the important foreground where the dialogue is occurring. Spielberg uses all parts of the frame, like the king he is. I love Steven Spielberg's movies. And if you've been watching films for the last 40 years, I would assume you do too. Except you, not you. Spielberg's long takes demonstrate the best of his style of directing because it shows how special he is at using the camera, actors, and set to create visually dynamic images that feel natural and stay with you. So yeah, this Spielberg guy, he's kinda good at this film thing.